Okay, we'll go ahead and get started. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. This is Elena Christopher with HFS Research. I'm pleased to welcome you to what we hope will be a great webinar today on cultivating an enterprise-wide automation mindset to help achieve intelligent automation success. I can tell you that one of the biggest questions that we get at HFS from various clients is it's all around how to scale RPA and broader intelligent automation. And I can assure you that we don't know the magic silver bullet, and all that means is that there really is not one answer. But what we do know is that part of the solution is certainly around creating the right culture for change in your enterprise. And that's the concept of the intelligent automation mindset that we'll be talking about today. So I'm very pleased to have a great set of panelists to talk with me today. We're essentially going to do an interview with some slides. But we have with us Scott Teeple of Agilify and James Sheehy. Let me let these gentlemen just briefly introduce themselves. How about Scott, kick us off, please.
Thank you, Elena. So welcome everyone. My name is Scott, as just discussed. I am with Agilify. And just to kind of just set the stage of who is Agilify, we've been on our intelligent journey automation for about 7 years now. We were born out of a shared services center of Ascension, and really trying to drive what was then efficiencies within the organization. So first and foremost, we are practitioners with a lot of experience and really trying to figure out how to bring automations into organizations. Several years ago, we decided to take our services and brand what is now Agilify, and we specialize in 3 kind of core areas that really assist organizations to unleash their human potential. The first is advisory on kind of the overall framework. The next is the technology and the alignment through health checks, and then the execution and the assistance and where an organization might need the help. And we are super excited to be on this journey with Gilead and James. James?
Thanks, Scott. Hi, everyone. My name is James Sheehy. I'm the Senior Director of Business Process Optimization, Intelligent Automation, and Organizational Change Management at Gilead. Just give you a brief intro to Gilead. So Gilead Sciences, or as we're often referred to as Gilead, we're an American biopharmaceutical company. We're principally involved in the research, development, and commercialization of drugs for unmet medical needs. We focus on antiviral drugs used in the treatment of HIV, Hep C, Hep B, and influenza. We were founded in 1987. Our headquarters are out of Foster City in California. We have operations worldwide, and we have over 10,000 employees.
Awesome. Thank you for those intros, gentlemen. So let me forge on to just a quick bit of housekeeping. For all of our great participants out there, thank you for joining. And as the slide suggests, we want to hear from you. If you look at the bottom of your screen window, there should be a button that says Q&A. If you click on this icon, it'll open up a pop-up window, sort of will look like a chat window. And we encourage you to submit any questions you may have throughout the conversation today. We'll be sure to save roughly about 10 minutes or so to address these questions at the end, but please, by all means, go ahead and submit your questions. Okay, so quickly, what are we going to talk about today? We're going to do 3 things. We're going to first, I'll do a few slides of HFS research content, really just showcasing and giving some market context to what we'll be talking about today around RPA and intelligent automation adoption trends and challenges. Then we'll toggle over to the interview with slides portion of the program, where we'll talk about Gilead's automation journey, really discussing its automation program and some of the things that it's done to really create that automation mindset I mentioned, and with the help of its partner Agilify. And then lastly, we always like to make sure that our webinars are actionable, so we'll try and leave you with some actionable recommendations and then finish off with the Q&A. So that is the game plan for today. So without further ado, let me dive into the first piece, which is some of the content. I wanted to first share with you the results of a recent study that we've done with 590 business leaders from around the world and across industries, including about 100 C-level executives. What we essentially asked them is we wanted to understand the why, sort of the purpose of any focus and adoption of intelligent automation. And so we asked a question around what are your strategic goals, which is the data on the left side of the screen, as well as what are your operational objectives, which is the data on the right side of the screen, to try and get a really robust view of what the adoption trends are. And really what surfaced is that there are a heck of a lot of lofty objectives for what enterprises hope to achieve with intelligent automation. I think what rises to the top is really the elements we have circled in the green here, which is there's a very strong focus on driving new revenue streams. The other element that's sort of the operational foil to the strategic focus of driving revenue growth is the focus on really improving customer experience. So these are really big objectives. The other point I'll make off of this slide is that what you see down in the lower right-hand corner, called by red, is the of respondents to this particular one is around eliminating headcount. And so while I think many enterprises would state that targeting cost reduction, perhaps achieved by eliminating headcount, is perhaps a reality, it's really not making it to the top of the strategic agendas here. I think the message overall here is that regardless of what your objectives are, you need to make sure that your strategy is ultimately aligned with what your execution is. But this is what some of our data is showing us today. So we just talked a bit about why enterprises are embracing intelligent automation. Now let's talk about, as you move from the strategy to the how you're going to get it done and through what means, let's talk a little bit about the inhibitors. So from the same study with about 590 enterprises globally, we'd asked them what their top 3 inhibitors are that are holding enterprises back from achieving both the strategic and operational goals. Now, I didn't call it out, but I'll draw your attention to it right now. The item that ranked as number 1 is scale. I find this a very interesting finding because scale is essentially an effect. It's not really a cause. And so what we did, instead of sort of take that at face value, because as I stated in my introductory comments, what I hear from most enterprises is that scale is a challenge for intelligent automation. We'll take that at face value, but peel back the onion a little bit more to try and understand a bit more about the causality to what's contributing to these scale challenges. And so what I would submit to you that it's some of these really important elements that we've got called out in the circles here. So the first one is really the lack of organizational clarity and accountability. I call this affectionately, who is driving the bus? It's sort of, once you have that strategy, you need to make sure that execution is very firm and it's very clear who's really, again, so-called driving the bus, or really providing leadership and guidance to the overall automation programs. Something related to that, but distinctly different, is change management. How is it affecting your employees? Is there a real open dialogue about what the impact of automation is? This is something that many enterprises are viewing as a large inhibitor. And the last one I'll draw your attention to is around talent. This particularly looks at the lack of in-house talent to support intelligent automation, and why it may be lower down the list. It's actually, in terms of enterprises who ranked it as its number 1 option, it's actually tied for 2nd place here. So these are very real and tangible inhibitors that every enterprise should be aware of as they're planning for and working towards a strong and effective execution. And so lastly, I'll just talk through some of the perhaps our thinking of what some of the challenges are, what's really driving some of these inhibitors. So we'll channel a little bit of Star Wars today and say perhaps there's an imbalance in the force. What I have up on the screen is just what should be a very familiar both graphic and concept to most. We can call it the perhaps original trifecta. or I've also heard this referred to as the golden triangle. But this concept of having a balance and integration between people, process, and technology has been a fundamental concept that's enabled and helped ensure success with technology-enabled transformation for years and years. When we think about this whole concept and we consider how enterprises are applying intelligent automation to their organizations today, I would submit to you that it perhaps looks a bit like this. There's a lot of focus and just a gigantic learning curve around understanding what RPA can do, what different facets of artificial intelligence, from machine learning to natural language processing to computer vision and so on and so forth. There's a massive focus on technology and perhaps not enough attention being paid to people and process. It's representative, but we believe that this represents part of the challenge today. And with that in mind, I'd like to use this as a bit of a segue to go over to kick off the interview portion of our conversation today. And with that, I'd like to pose a question to James. James, you gave us a bit of an intro about your company, Gilead, earlier in your introductory comments, but within Gilead, so you're a pharmaceutical company. Could you tell us a little bit about your role and ultimately how it's helping to support your enterprise, to give us a good baseline of context?
Sure, thanks, Elena. So I'm presently looking after a pillar within our CFO 2020 program. So the objective of this CFO 2020 program is to ensure we're able to handle complexities through the company's growth. One potential complexity the leadership team identified back in 2016 when CFO 2020 came to be was process maturation. So processes and data will need to be assessed to identify opportunities for scale and efficiency. As a result of that, the process maturation team or pillar was formed. I am a co-lead of that process maturation pillar. And really, what we're tasked with doing is building an internal process improvement capability, leveraging some established, Lean Six Sigma framework and methodology. And with that process improvement mindset and framework, we were set to task with re-engineering selected processes to overcome some of the chronic pain points that existed within those processes. So really it's around, trying to create more scale, having mature processes in place so that in the year 2020, when we do face more complexities than what we face today, maybe, it's through companies' expansion, we're advancing into new therapeutic areas. It's really making sure we have the proper, if you think back to your people, process, technology trifecta earlier, the other pillars within CFO 2020 look at the other two aspects of that trifecta, so people and technology.
Cool. Thank you for that background in detail, James. Just a quick clarification. So it's the CFO 2020 program, and I love the forward-looking notion of it. Could you briefly share with our participants exactly what does the CFO organization include, so we have a sense of what you're applying this to?
Yeah, sure. So at Gilead, the CFO organization comprises of a number of functions, obviously finance, but also IT and also facility operations. So it's quite a broad scope. We have 3 financial shared service centers, one operating out of Cork in Ireland, servicing your EMEA and LATAM markets. We have one in APAC, servicing the APAC region, and then we have one in Foster City, California, looking after North America. So they're the kind of primary functions that we focus this process maturation effort on.
Got it. Okay. Very helpful. So you've just articulated that you've developed this program within Gilead, CFO 2020, focused on process maturation and ultimately transformation. How did automation come into the mix? Why did you look to automation as a potential pillar or lever to help with this, and what were you hoping to achieve?
I think firstly, what we wanted to do was find an identity that we felt would resonate with, within the CFO organization. And we chose the identity Elevate. I think you have a slide showing that, where we have the sigma representing the E. And if you look Elevate up in the dictionary, it's very much, you'll find it's about raising or lifting something to a higher or more important or impressive level. So Elevate became the identity of the process maturation team. And as part of Elevate, we have two primary levers, one of which is the 5-step process improvement framework that I mentioned earlier. And again, we wanted to kind of develop a framework that was welcoming, simple, easy to understand. It promoted and supported self-service. So again, if you think about the people component of this, we want to enable individuals and empower them to go about improving or maturing processes themselves. The second lever within the Elevate process maturation framework was automation. So when we talk or think about maturing processes, we couldn't ignore automation or robotic process automation or intelligent automation. So really, that's when we first started looking at this. We also looked at automation.
Got it. And so one of the things I'll call out sort of as we're going through this, James, I think it's notable that you did a couple of things here. You really created an identity for your program. And what's interesting about the terminology or nomenclature that you used here is that it also implies a mission. So I think that that's something that's quite handy as you're thinking about setting up these programs to be effective. Okay, so you CFO 2020, process transformation, built the Elevate program. So where did you really start with automation? Everyone has to start somewhere. Tell us a bit about the Gilead journey.
Yeah, so again, as briefly touched on earlier, we couldn't ignore looking at the use of robotics and its potential benefits, such as, improving efficiency, productivity, compliance, customer experience, and so on. So we felt, when we talked about this internally, that RPA as a concept had already been proven. So we decided to conduct a POV, proof of value. And we used that proof of value to evaluate different tools and their overall suitability with our goals and intended robotic operating models. So on the screen here, you can kind of see the scope of what that proof of value entails. So we engaged some of the regional FSSs. And in engaging, we wanted to bring them on this journey with us. So we wanted to do this together rather than them feel like we were doing it to them. So we engaged early. We provided a lot of detail and context around RPA, what RPA is and is not. We walked them through the selection process or candidate process identification, the selection criteria. We came up with a list of 20 candidate processes from the regional FSSs. We chose 7, and then we built automation using 3 different RPA technologies. So we were able to better understand those technologies, better understand their suitability or otherwise for with how we intended to move forward if we demonstrated there was value in RPA for Gilead. So I thought it was very clever to approach it that way. We learned a lot from it, and ultimately it kind of enabled us to demonstrate or confirm to the leadership team that following our pilot, there was value from RPA for Gilead.
Got it. Okay. And a clarifying question on that one. So, because I feel like a lot of enterprises will talk about how they'll do proof of concepts, and I think there's been loads and loads of proof of concepts. I appreciate your focus on proof of value, sort of acknowledging that, well, yes, I think conceptually it's there, but we need to determine if could be value for Gilead. Could you maybe take just another moment more, James, and just talk about when you thought of value, what kind of value points were you looking for? Obviously, just by the nature of inclusion in your CFO 2020 process improvement and transformation program, you're obviously looking for improvement. Process improvement is one of the values, but could you comment a little further on what kind of value, perhaps?
Yeah, it's very much around creating that scale. So how do we do more with the same headcount? So, we're getting bigger, we're getting busier. You can't constantly push more and more onto your existing workforce. So we wanted to try and not only be able to do more with the same, but we wanted to try and support individuals' kind of career aspirations in terms of getting involved in more meaningful or impactful tasks. So it was really the primary focus for us, and you kind of alluded to it earlier when you spoke about the drivers or motivating factors for companies or organizations looking at intelligent automation. Really for us it was around creating capacity. So how can we generate capacity to do more with the same? So rather than look at adding headcount through our next leg of growth, can we just do more with the existing headcount and introduce some digital labor or elevated team members to support us?
Super. Thank you for that, James. In many ways, what I just asked was just trying to make sure that certainly I and our participants on the call today just have an understanding of essentially the why for Gilead. Really, what were you trying to get out of this? Alrighty then. Mm-hmm. So you went through that POV, the proof of value, and you determined that there was indeed going to be value for Gilead. So really, you've talked a little bit about some of the I can't say that word today, operationalizing the vision, but I know that there's more to that. We'd love you to talk a little bit about what you put in place to really make it real and to bring some structure to your program.
Yeah, sure. So, having established that broad vision, for RPA at the senior level at Gilead and having successfully completed the POV, our emphasis, and I'll be very honest, we kind of were looking at this earlier on as well. So it's not that we started to look at this for the first time. We did, through the proof of value, ask kind of pointed questions and did our research around better understanding how best to stand up a robotic operating model and governance framework. Our leadership team were very passionate about understanding what controls, checks, and balances would be put in place to ensure, while creating scale, we don't create issues on the back end or issues, for operations or issues for the auditors. So we wanted to make sure we had a very robust ROM, or robotic operating model, and supporting governance framework. And on the slide that's depicted here, you can kind of see what our objective was, and I won't read word for word, I'll just touch on some of the salient points, but it was around building that governance framework and ROM so we had a structured and controlled environment for managing the upfront demand, but also managing the development, the delivery, and the operation and maintenance of newly deployed automations or break, fix, and enhancements to existing automations. So we have a very robust process in place. We engaged the controls teams, the SOX teams very, very early on. We engaged, as I mentioned, the business. And this is typically how our MO, or modus operandi, we go out early and communicate, we go out early and engage. And we engage, not only early, but very often. And you can see here some of the components that we put in place. We fully expect, kind of a year or 14 months on from when we first started, we're continually looking at this. This is certainly by no means fully established or fully embedded. We're always looking at opportunities to further evolve and further improve. But we have all of the key components here, to ensure not only did we stand up a successful ROM, but we have one that can help us grow and grow in a controlled way.
Super. I appreciate that detail, James. One thing I want to call out, just to be transparent, since we have it on the slide here, it looks like for your RPA program, the underlying tool set that Gilead is utilizing is Blue Prism. Is that right?
Correct. That's, one of the RPA software applications we evaluated as part of our POV. And this is the one we settled on because it best suited the operating model we had, planned on implementing.
Got it. Okay. So obviously, Blue Prism is one of your partners on this journey, and the other one is Agilify. So I'd like to bring Agilify into the conversation a bit. And as you've been on this journey, really, how did Agilify come into the mix? How did they start working with Gilead?
Yeah, sure. So firstly, we engaged Agilify to discuss an opportunity for them to provide some RPA, foundational and practitioner training. So that ROM I referred to earlier, our robotic operating model, when we first established that, it was a COE, a Center of Excellence. Everything was managed centrally in terms of the opportunity assessment, the development, the deployment, the operation, and the maintenance. However, we're a global company, as I mentioned. We have 3 regional financial shared service centers. And part of our aspiration was to move more from a centralized model to a federated model, where we have RPA capability in function or in region. So we also wanted the COE team members to be trained because we did the proof of value, but none of us had actually been trained as RPA practitioners. So long story short, we contacted Agilify. We spoke to a number of potential partners, actually, spoke with Agilify to better understand their offering, their pricing model, willingness to tailor the training content to suit our requirements. And having done our due diligence, we decided to proceed with Agilify. And we started with 1 round of RPA foundations and practitioner training. That's the 2-week program, 2 full weeks with some exercises at the end. So our Center of Excellence team members completed that training. And that went very well. We did a lessons learned at the end of it. We went back to Agilify again. We're able to engage them for subsequent rounds of training, whereas you can see here on the screen, we brought people in from different functions and we had them trained as RPA practitioners. So that's kind of how we worked with Agilify initially, and I think in aggregate they've trained over 20 people from across Gilead worldwide. We have practitioners from Hong Kong, from Cork in Ireland, from across the US. And training all those individuals allowed us to scale. We had cross-functional representation. And we also, from a change management perspective, we now had evangelists in function. So we had individuals that understood RPA, what it can and cannot do. And they became a voice for us, became evangelists, ambassadors, and started to create better understanding and comprehension in function and in country and in region about our RPA program.
Really important point. I mean, I'll just harken back to some of the data I shared at the start of our conversation today, where enterprises had identified the lack of talent as a real inhibitor. So by the same token, when I hear a lot of enterprises talk about how they want to really reskill or educate their existing workforce, it's often sometimes a bit of lip service, and I don't always see the follow through. So this is a nice tangible example about how you at Gilead really invested. Scott, I'd like to bring you into the conversation as part of Agilify that helped really kick off some of this training. This whole concept of cultivating talent and reskilling talent, it's a major pain point, as I just mentioned. Tell me a little bit about the Agilify approach here. Do you just offer technical training, or are you also helping to build some of that so-called automation mindset that we've been talking about throughout our conversation today? What do you think?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely, Elena. Thanks for that. So yeah, we are focused on the technology, but as you've mentioned, Agilify's focus is much more than just the technical training. Thinking through how the individuals really do their work, being conscious about the overall change in the mindset, creating materials around, say, automation awareness, helping individuals not only deal with what is automation, but how to apply that automation. Where are the low-hanging fruits, or how does an individual look at the overall processes that they do every day and say, hey, how do I take advantage of this new thing? Also focused on organizational change management workshops, really looking at kind of utilizing what has worked really well in the space of ITIL and applying that within a business. Within organizational change management, whether that's implementing a new concept called business change management, or courses around the associate or the employee experience or the customer experience, or including somewhat of a new concept around what we call total automation program yield, where we're focused more on not just the ROI or the return on investment, but the overall program and how automation can start impacting in areas around audit and quality, controls, speed to market, things like that.
Got it. Helpful. And it just really underscoring that point that it's not just about the technical training. James, I'd like the word that you used is that one of the results you got from this investment, and I want to very intentionally call it an investment in training, your super users, as you refer to them, is that they turned into evangelists. I really just think that the impact and the importance of that can't be underestimated. So there's another part to this story, though, I believe, because Agilify started working with Gilead from a training context. But James, I believe Gilead then tapped Agilify to do more. Could you tell us a bit about that?
Yeah, sure, of course. Thanks, Elena. So, we went into this very much with our eyes wide open. And Agilify were very kind of transparent to, during the training and kind of at the end of the training, in helping us kind of appreciate and understand that, following 2 weeks of training, you don't become an RPA subject matter expert or senior practitioner. It takes time on the job for you to develop that proficiency. Now, we fully accepted that and understood it, and we knew by developing some of the automations in-house, we would be able to grow, our confidence, grow our proficiency in the area of building and supporting automation. That said, we did want to scale. We wanted to get more automations in place as quickly as we could. And, myself and my team were able to kind of put forward a proposal around like a hybrid delivery model where, we would partner with a third party. And again, we were impressed with what we had seen from Agilify through the training. I had spoken to them about some of their other offerings, had spoken to some of their customers. Long story short, we decided that we would kind of enter into a new arrangement where Agilify would support us. And they provide us with phone support for the automations or bots that we're building ourselves, so we can get on the phone with a developer who can provide us with some mentoring, coaching, guidance. But almost more importantly, Agilify would take on kind of more of a hands-on role in developing some of the more complex bots. I like to use the analogy that, like, following 2 weeks of training, myself and my team were, equipped to build log cabins. However, Agilify and their senior practitioners who have been at this for years can basically build much larger buildings than that, with all of the bells, whistles, fire escapes, you name it. So we've been partnering with them now for a number of months. On the screen here, you can see some of the automations they supported us with. Supported is probably an understatement. They've taken on the leadership role in terms of building these. Some of these were for the Hong Kong team. You can see some of the time savings here, the annualized savings in terms of hours of capacity created, the function. So we've already deployed, I want to say 4 now, because another one has just gone live, and there's one more going live next week. So soon it will be 5 automations. So yeah, we're working with them in that regard now also. So training, phone support, building automations. They've helped us kind of better understand where next as well with our operating model. Because when working with us, they were able to see the templates we're using, the bot lifecycle methodology that we have in place, and we're able to offer some inputs, informed inputs in terms of where we may be able to make some improvements.
Got it. Okay. So definitely was a bit of a bridging going from the training to being an ongoing implementation partner. Scott, as you made that bridge, any additional comments to add about really how Agilify facilitated that? And I also think one important thing we should make sure we're being very clear about is some of the time parameters. So James, this really all kicked off, and I believe you started the program in 2017 and then really started a lot of the work in 2018. Am I correct with that time periodicity?
So that's correct. So we did that proof of value, we did it in the winter or the fall of 2017. It happened over a 10-week period. We got the go-ahead for the formal RPA program in January 2018. And at the end of 2018, we had deployed 16 bots and had generated approximately 4,500 hours of capacity. But that's just purely focusing on the tangibles. There were other benefits to be derived from the bots that we deployed. So it's back to Scott's point about the total automation program yield, where we look at both tangibles and intangibles. But yes, I suppose all in all, it's been about 12 or 13 months.
Sure, and just wanted to be clear about the periodicity, because I want everyone that's participating in the webinar today to know that this is not, Gilead has not been on this journey for years and years and years. It's something that you embraced it somewhat recently, but have just really showed up with a clear plan in mind and are making great strides. Scott, anything to add to these points?
Yeah, the only thing I would really kind of layer on top of this is just this notion of it's not a out of the box kind of a delivery model that we really implemented here. And taking a look at the organization, every organization is different and at a different spot in their journeys. When they've seen success implementing any kind of transformation in the organization, bringing that type of mindset to say, hey, how do we best deliver for the organization that's out in front of us and tailor that exactly for them to really bring that really fast ROI or the return needed for their organization.
Super. Thanks for that add, Scott. So I think what I'd like to do now is that as you saw my slightly cheeky Venn diagram with the gigantic technology bubble and the much smaller, more modest process and people bubbles. We know technology is only a part of the equation. So James, I'd love to pivot the conversation a little bit to talk about some of the specific things that you've done to really help focus and impact culture and really get employees to understand what automation could mean for them and more broadly for Gilead. And I know one of the things I want to point out is that you've had this term Eve on a couple of your slides. I think maybe talking about what is Eve would be great.
Sure, thanks, Elena. So I did talk about Eve earlier, and Eve is symbolic. So Elevate, as you would have heard from me earlier on, was the identity we found from a process maturation perspective. And when looking at Elevate and looking at the automation component of that, Eve comes from the Elevate process improvement framework, and Eve is symbolic. It's Gilead's first genderless digital team member or elevated virtual employee, EVE. And again, why we wanted to come up with this clever branding was to help individuals within the CFO org better understand what RPA is and what RPA is not. I think in terms of making it stick and making people embrace it, you need to demystify some of the misunderstandings that are out there today around RPA or intelligent automation. So what Eve is not, and again, this is just some clever slides we as a team put together. It's not HAL, for any of you that may know the space, know the movie Space Odyssey, where HAL came in and took over the spaceship. It's not that type of a robot. It's not Siri from the Apple iPhones or iPads, so it doesn't, you can't talk to it and get an answer back, and it's certainly not a physical robot that like the one in the Jetsons that would move around and bring you tea and coffee on demand. Maybe one day we'll get there. And then we moved more to, well, what is Eve? And talked about some of these points earlier, genderless, flexible digital team member. So it's virtual, it's a software robot. It's not something you can see, but it's there. It helps you save time by performing tasks in minutes. It allows people therefore to focus on more key or value add or strategic activities. It has its own credentials for logging into the needed or impacted applications. And then just to kind of keep it light, again, kind of put something in here around it'll have a manager, it'll work 24/7, and even on a lighter note, it doesn't require goal setting or year-end review. So
interesting.
Then, again, sorry, go ahead, Elena.
No, sorry, I was just going to give a lead into this one. So, I mean, I love the fact that you spent, I mean, you created an identity and you spent time and effort to really articulate it broadly within Gilead. We've talked a bit about some of the training that you did for your super users, but I know, for example, up on this slide, it talks a bit about your knowledge sessions. Could you talk about how you actually push this information to the Gilead employees?
Yeah, sure. So again, you're sitting down within the Elevate COE or the EVE COE, the Center of Excellence, and talking about how we can create greater awareness, understanding, address any of the apprehension, anxiousness that might exist. Also, when completing opportunity assessments, maybe some groups, there might be pushback because they don't truly understand why it is we're looking to, deploy digital labor. So we set to task, and what we put together some Elevate and EVE training materials. Again, very short, snappy, something similar to what you've seen here today in terms of slide content. And then we put various offerings in place. We considered all of the different time zones. We put multiple offerings out there. And, we provided overview sessions. We provided training sessions on how to utilize the Elevate Process Improvement Framework and all of its templates. We made people aware of some of the collateral that we had posted on this website that we developed. So we had an Elevate website where we articulated the vision, introduced Elevate, the Process Improvement Framework. We had some sections on there around leading practices and thought leadership, the art of the possible. There were some case studies published. We actually had some videos as well with some music, again, to keep it kind of lighthearted of Eve and the other digital team members at work. We showed some before and after illustrations. We had some testimonials from business process owners that had worked with us on our RPA program and are benefactors of some of the bots that are helping today. So in aggregate, at the end of 2018, we had over 400 people attend either one of the training or the knowledge sessions. And again, that was very powerful for us from an organizational change management perspective, because it really helped people understand what Elevate is and is not, what Eve is and is not, where you can go for support, how you can engage if you have ideas, or if you need help. So that's just a little bit of what we've done and will continue to do in 2019.
Thank you. I'm glad you just mentioned the word continue, because my next question was literally going to be, was this a point in time, James, or as I believe your response will be based on your reference to 2019, does this activity continue?
Very much so. We're presenting actually at one of our CFO leadership team meeting. We'll talk a little bit again about what we accomplished in 2018, but very much it's forward-looking, as was the spirit of the CFO 2020 program. So this year, we've already set our goals for 2019 in terms of the number of hours of capacity we want to create. We also have a very robust pipeline. We have almost 90 processes that have been registered as candidates for EVE or PA. We will also be re-engineering half a dozen processes, addressing and removing some of those chronic pain points. We will also be looking at rolling out some additional RPA super user training. And more importantly, and you talked about some of this earlier as well, Elena, we will, with the support of Agilify and Blue Prism, we'll be hosting our first EVE collaboration conference, where we'll have people from outside and from within Gilead attend, and we'll be talking about what next. We'll be looking at how we can evolve our robotic operating model. What are the emerging technologies that can maybe take us to the next stage of this journey? So constantly, looking, moving forward. Success is kind of in the moment, but it's more moving forward for us. That's the trajectory we want to keep.
Really, really exciting stuff, James. Scott, I'd love you to weigh in here. You'd mentioned earlier, I mean, the Agilify story is an interesting one where your parent company, Ascension Health, that you're essentially 7 years on in your automation journey, and you've really just achieved a ton at your mothership, so to speak. But obviously, Agilify, you're bringing a lot of that knowledge and experience. I think you used the term practitioners earlier as just an apt way to describe the folks who work for and support clients within Agilify. What I'd love you to comment on is how you've taken some of that just deep knowledge, that practitioner mindset, and really brought that to Gilead to help get them on this path. Would love your thoughts here.
Yeah, sure. So, as we think through what is intelligent automation, there's more than just the concept of RPA. The IEEE standards that's going on to really define what is in this space really takes us into what is desktop automation versus batch-based automation. Then you start getting into some cognitive areas around, really the intelligent inside of it. So when we look at kind of our practitioner and what we've been able to accomplish is taking it from that first step, what we call kind of the gateway drug of automation, which is the RPA, and start thinking about not just the low-hanging fruit or the rules-based automation, but really starting to challenge what the individuals are doing on a day-to-day basis and start bringing in a little bit more of the concept around trigger-based automation. How do we start engaging the associates or the employees to help them in their day-to-day operations? We call this kind of process internally and externally REDELO, or reimagine the day in the life of, where we start taking this concept of just rules-based and saying, how do we start looking at what the employees are doing on a day-to-day basis? How do we bring them to what they're really good at, which is cognitive or making decisions? How do we bring the knowledge support real-time to the individuals to assist them in the day-to-day? So where your automation in a rules-based are only taking, say, 20 to 30% of end-to-end process, we say, hey, there's opportunities to start applying automation really across that entire straight-through processing and start bringing automations to advance what's going on. And so that concept of reimagine the day in the life of is some of that that we really are starting to bring, not just to our as you said, our first client, Ascension, where we've deployed this multiple times, but also into the external space.
Super. Thanks for those ads, Scott. Just really looking at time here, I'm going to just pop over this slide because I want to make sure that we give you, James, an opportunity to talk about, you just mentioned a couple comments back about where you go from here, but would love you just to have a formal moment to talk about what have you guys achieved so far? Really, what has automation been able to do for Gilead at this time, and where does it go from here?
Yeah, sure. So as you can see kind of here on the screen, just a supporting slide. I touched on some of this a little bit earlier. So we presently have 16 bots or automations that have been deployed supporting a number of different regions and functions within those regions. And for us, sometimes we don't take the biggest, most impactful process because we want to be able to demonstrate to functions that may not traditionally be targeted by RPA, but there is applicability in RPA for those functions. So we have bots in facilities, we have bots in payroll, we have them in our 3 FSSs, in record to report, order to cash, procure to pay. We have them in the 3 regions. And in aggregate, we've created, as mentioned earlier, around 4,500 hours. Our focus in 2019 is to continue to grow our bot footprint. We're very much focused, on how we create additional capacity or scale so that we can continue to do even more with the same headcount. So we are just recently completed our opportunity assessment where we evaluated, I think, close to 50 processes. We scored each of them, we prioritized them, and now we have our list of processes that we'll be RPAing in 2019. Again, our model is what we depicted earlier. It's the hybrid model. We'll build some, and Agilify will build some, and collectively we'll achieve our target. And then we'll be providing additional training because individuals are also starting to build bots in function or in region. It's all governed still centrally by the EVE COE. That's my team. So really, it's just kind of continuing to build on the foundations we've put in place, continue to grow the scale, do more EVE, do more Elevate, look at what else we might be able to supplement our RPA with. Like Scott mentioned, you mentioned, Elena, maybe the application of artificial intelligence can help broaden the scope and extend the capabilities where RPA may be limited.
Super. Thank you for that vision, James. And now let's close out the formal interview portion of this and see if we can bottom line some of this. And I'd love James and Scott, I'd love you guys both to comment. But from a bottom line standpoint, James, as you reflect on your experience in bringing this live and growing it and scaling it within Gilead, and Scott, your experience as part of Agilify, assisting Gilead in achieving that, as well as your broader experience both at Ascension and with your broad market footprint. I'd love each of you to comment on what you really think the one or two keys are to really generating success to cultivate that automation mindset and really create the right culture for change in your enterprise so you can achieve intelligent automation success. James, I'd love you to kick us off with just a couple of thoughts on that.
Yeah, sure. For me, I see you've captured some of these points on the slide that's being displayed at the moment. I talked earlier about, when we first started, we spoke with a number of vendors, a number of client references, and, we attended webinars and lots of talks and things like that. And lots of companies were talking around or talking about RPA, but hadn't taken that leap of faith. So for me, it's very much about, the very first bullet, like dream big, but start small. But most of all, don't forget to start. Get started, do a proof of value if that's what you so choose. I think then in terms of, kind of creating support for the RPA program, it's very much centers around the organizational change management, creating that identity for the automation program, going out often and early to educate users, put on the mission, share the results, kind of gather input, lessons learned from them. And finally, for me, I think a strong service partner that understands your mission is key. I often kind of refer to finding the right service partner, use the analogy of going out dating. You don't always find the right match first time. Sometimes you need to keep looking. So I think, find the service partner that is right for you, that listens to you, that will work with you, that will partner with you. And I think collectively then, you're much stronger than you are as kind of individual organizations.
Super. Thank you for that, James. Scott, what would you throw into the mix on this? What have you learned along the way?
Yeah, I think that it's in the identification or the understanding of the stall points that can and will occur within your automation program. Really looking at it from a strategic perspective, and to James' point, having a practitioner or a partner that understands, and because they've lived it, they've done it, they've addressed those stall points. The other thing is, it's not a one size fits all. The journey is long, and what James says, start small, but just start. And then the third, and I think to Gilead's credit, it was key to be open, inclusive communications and engaging with the business, IT, audit, all the departments as you really started to engage. It wasn't a secret, but really communicating the overall strategy was critical to their success.
Super. I think that those are all really great recommendations. What I'd like to do now, as promised, is go to some Q&A. Scott and James, we've got a variety of interesting questions that have come from our participants. Thank you to the participants for giving us thoughtful questions. I'll kick off with one around there's some curiosity, James, as you and Gilead really embraced automation. What were some of the biggest surprises, things that you didn't anticipate that you stumbled upon, or perhaps even surprised your senior management? The people would like to know.
Yeah, for me, I guess we didn't know much, to be quite honest, when we started our RPA journey. So we kind of approached this with an open mind and a critical eye. We listened attentively, and we kind of tried to poke holes in things where we didn't understand. As we kind of progressed through the journey, we became a bit more knowledgeable. Still a lot to learn, but we're able to then better hold conversations with those that were more seasoned. I guess for me, it's kind of starting out when you don't know a lot, kind of adopt a position almost of mistrust and kind of ask pointed questions if you don't understand, because it can be very technical. But once we got into it, I heard terms like low code or no code. One of the surprising things for me was that, and I talked a little bit about it earlier, it takes time for individuals to acquire that level of proficiency. I think a lot of people thought it's just going out and writing very simple scripts. And a lot of the bots, the more simple ones, that's all it takes. It's very straightforward. But the more complex ones that touch multiple applications that may have different types of exceptions or decision points, it takes time to build those and build them well. And what you want are robust automations that will routinely run without falling over. So for me, that was kind of the key learning, is sometimes it's better to kind of go a little bit slower and understand exactly what it is you're taking on in order to make it work well.
Super, thanks for that. Let's go on to ask in a slightly different direction. We had actually a couple of questions about this concept of bot mortality. I think what's ultimately being asked is that certainly when business processes change, how do you react and ensure nimbleness to cover that? And I think perhaps the second interpretation of that question is around, for processes that you're automating using RPA, do you view that as a permanent strategy, or is it a point in time? We'd love your thoughts on that, James, and Scott, I'm sure you probably have something to add to that as well.
So on the bot mortality piece, again, referencing back to the robotic operating model and the governance framework that we put in place, and all of the knowledge sessions that we provided. So we routinely have checkpoints with the business process owners that have bots supporting one or more of the processes within their function. We also built in alerts to all of the automations. So there are planned alerts when the bot gets initiated or when it completes, but there's also exception alerts that are triggered. So if there's any changes that were made by someone in the business unwittingly, that will adversely affect the bot's the bot being able to complete the process successfully, alerts get triggered to both the business and the Eve COE. So it's a combination of education, but also monitoring through the alerts. In terms of the second question, point in time, some of it can be point in time. Give you an example, some of the bots that we've built, we know the applications that they interact with will be upgraded in the coming years. We don't have definitive timelines on those. We do know it's going to happen. So we'll have to do an impact analysis in the test environment of the new upgraded environment, and then we'll have to retrofit the bots. Some of the bots may end up getting retired, if a process itself gets retired or a system gets retired. We're aware of that. We have kind of controlled checks and balances in place, and we're happy to have that be part of our program.
Yeah, and if I can here, we've over the years have put in automations that have a shelf life, knowing that as we wait for an IT organization to do their 5 million 5-year project, the business is sitting there waiting, saying, what do I do in the meantime? Bringing automation in, and maybe more like a fruit fly automation where we know that it's going to die really soon. Let's go ahead and do that, even if it's a 5-month ROI, or excuse me, you put it in place in a couple of months, you get your ROI really fast, and it's only there for 5 months. Who cares? That's advantages and cost efficiencies that you've brought in the meantime.
Thank you, gentlemen. And it's the one thing I always like to phrase digital workers specifically as such, just underscoring the fact that they are workers, they're part of your team. So a lot of the concepts that perhaps you apply to human workers, like they need to be augmented in their own skill sets, or perhaps there's a concept of retirement. It's applicable here for your digital workers as well. So we're just at time, but I'm going to just sneak one more question in because it came up a few times. The participants on the webinar today, they'd really like to understand your thoughts on how you're actually maximizing your utilization of the bots, James. So would love perhaps, James, for you to talk a little bit about how you're grappling with, well, you tell us if it's a challenge, but just overall how you're grappling with getting good optimization out of the bots that you've built. And then Scott, would love you to add in any wisdom there as well as we close this out.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Elena. And actually, that's an interesting question because it's a topic we'll be looking at that collaboration conference I mentioned earlier. This is an area where we know we can mature more. We're currently kind of managing our bots through the resource utilization of those runtime resources or robots through like Excel spreadsheets. So on one hand, we're working with state-of-the-art RPA technology, and on the other side, we're using kind of older technology to try and control and monitor them. We have been speaking with Agilify, and there are tools there today that can help you monitor your resource utilization and get the best utilization from your runtime resource. There's ways you can pool your resources together, which is something we've started to do. You can get more advanced in how you manage, set up, and manage your scheduling of your automation. So that's an area we'll be focusing more on this year because we want to get the maximum return from the investment as it relates to those runtime resources.
Super.
Yeah, no, that's perfect. And Elena, yeah, I guess that is exactly the angles that Agilify is taking and helping now as we do have some maturity around the pooling of the runtime resources, the scheduling, the analytics, even creating workshops that we can come in and help your organization around analytics and the virtualization of and the utilization of and just the overall access into, especially when you start thinking about a supervisor no longer having the access of the employee just sitting there doing the work, but now they're actually managing this digital thing that there is no visibility into.
Super. Thank you, gentlemen. And so with that, I would like to conclude our webinar today. I'd like to give a big thank you to James from Gilead and Scott from Agilify. Really appreciated the opportunity to talk with you today and just really sharing some great insights into Gilead's journey and the role that Agilify is playing in supporting them and really creating that automation mindset and driving change for Gilead's enterprise. For those of you who submitted questions that perhaps we did not get to, we will pull them and make sure that at a minimum we do a good follow-up with you with some written responses. But with that, I'd like to thank everyone for attending, and I hope everybody has a great rest of the day. This concludes the webinar. Thank you.